wonderful to be here on a Saturday. I'm here at least 5 days a week and enjoy every opportunity that I get to meet with so many people from all over the country, all over the world, who are eager to press forward into careers and change the world. I hope the best for all of us. So there's one little public service announcement I have this morning, and that is for those who come to my office frequently during the week. Now, I am a postal assistant. That is my title, postal assistant. It was either that or be a greeter at Walmart. But I thought you guys were a little bit more interesting. So what I've noticed since I've been here is that we go through our days, our daily schedules, and often don't even take notice or ask the question, why, about things that are right in front of us. We go through it day after day, and it just kind of fades into the background. So I started asking people, as they were coming up to my office to receive packages, I would ask them, why is that package, or why is that slip blue? Well, I don't know. Does it cost more to send it, or something? Or is it coming from a place that's further away? No. So the public service announcement is this. Before everyone graduates from here, from Con, I want you to know a secret. And here's what it is. Every package that we receive comes from a different supplier, comes from a different delivery. The blue represents FedEx. The pink represents the United States Postal Service. The yellow comes from UPS. How many have ever received one of these before? Oh, good. All right. All right. The green one, though, is very special. It is for faculty and staff, and we don't care where it came from. Okay. But today, I want to talk about searching for common ground. And we're talking about collaboration. And Genius Loves Company is an album that I have, and it's an album that I enjoy, in particular, one particular song done by Ray Charles and B.B. King. I love the blues, and I love B.B. King, and when they did this song together, I've played it, it seems like hundreds of times. The Sinner's Prayer. Now, I got to tell you that aside from being a postal assistant here at Connecticut College, I am also a minister. How many knew that? Anybody? Nobody. Okay. So I'm a minister. Now, I'm not going to preach, I hope, but I will take up an offering if it's okay. All right. So what happens when people decide to collaborate? Well, to talk about this the way I want to talk about it, I got to introduce you to my father. Now, my father passed away about a little over 5 years ago, and guess what he was? Career-wise, he was a minister for 50 years. In fact, I can trace that vocation all the way back into the 14th century, one generation after another generation. And so there's certain expectations that come with that particular vocation. And one is that you think that the guy, whether he's, whether he wears, particular clerical garb or whatever, or he's like my dad who could care less, all of them are expected to live a little bit more of a virtuous life. Well, being a preacher's son, you see some other things that don't exactly get there. And being a preacher's son, we tend to remind them about it. Now, that doesn't go over too well. So, over the years, as I said, my father was he pastored for almost 50 years. He pastored in 6 churches, and toward the end of his life, he actually was an interim pastor. His last mission field was Martha's Vineyard. Really tough. The natives were very restless. But here's 6 of the churches that my father pastored, and I have to say that even though he was very successful as a pastor, it seemed like whenever he'd go into a church, it always seemed to grow. And I thought that was pretty cool. But our relationship went in a different direction. And a lot of that early on had to do with the fact that ministers tend to move. We're kind of like the military. You got to move every 3 or 4 years. And that's exactly what happened. And so many of the things that were happening in my life that I thought were going in a very, very positive direction always seemed to be tripped up by my dad's vocation, his calling. And so it seemed like I would get to a certain place of success all through my life, and it seemed like that he was always deciding to move just when it was getting really, really good. So by the time I was in high school, I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore class president. I played on the football field. I was pretty good at sports. And right in the middle of all that, my dad reminds me that, well, it's probably time to move. And I was shocked. I was at that place where it seemed like everything that I was doing right, he was messing up. I know I'm probably the only one that has ever had this experience. So, well, it goes on. So, when we moved to a place called Conneaut, Ohio, which is right up on Lake Erie. We lived about 7/10 of a mile from the lake, and it was cold, real cold. The winter that we had here, that's pretty normal for up there. So I got used to that kind of stuff pretty quick, but one thing that occurred within only 3 weeks after we had moved to Conneaut was that 12 guys came into high school one morning, and they were wearing blue jeans. Blue jeans, can you believe it? It was awful. They were called into the principal's office and reminded that we have a dress code here. You can wear any color of jean, but blue. This is no kidding. If it was denim and if it was blue, you were out. And so these guys were given the option of being able to go home, change, and come back, and they would not be suspended. Instead, what they chose to do was they chose to swing around real quick, throw their hands up against the wall, and spread them. Well, that really went over very well with our principal, who just happened to be a retired Army colonel. Sweet. So I saw these guys being marched out of the school that day, and it was just between classes, and there was a couple guys I knew pretty well, had gotten to know, and so I asked them, what's going on? They told me. Well, at noon, at lunchtime, I decided to go home, which is just about, a quarter of a mile away. Went home, I managed to find a piece of denim, and I came back to school, and I had put that denim around my arm. Now, that started a problem, too. And by the next day, I had convinced about 500 kids to wear blue jeans. Now, mind you, I've only been in this school about 3 weeks. 3 weeks, all right? And already I was starting to make a little trouble. Well, I was kind of enjoying something, and that was that my father, who had also been in the area only 3 weeks, and of course, he was trying to make a kind of a name for himself, and wanted people to know who he was and all that, and he was doing all the right stuff to make that happen. And then his son manages to get 500 plus students to wear blue jeans. And of course, that caused a problem in the school, and my father was summarily called by the principal, and he said, you got to do something. Well, after that, my dad and I didn't talk for quite some time, but I was going home. We were starting to resolve this issue. We were actually going to take this thing to court. But when I was going home one night, there was a van that pulled up, and lo and behold, there was these guys from the Students for the Democratic Society. These guys are some rough characters, and they wanted to help me. Well, I didn't know exactly what kind of help they wanted to provide. They were known for bombing stuff, you know. They were the terrorists of the day. And so I thought, you know, there's no way I'm going to deal with these guys. But when I got home, within an hour, there was a knock on the door. My father went to the door, and there were these two guys. Let me show you this, if I can get there. Two guys from the FBI. Okay. Now, mind you, we're probably into week 4 now, okay? And I've got the FBI asking me questions about my connection with the Students for a Democratic Society, which I had none. But I was kind of caught in this place where, on the one hand, I was thinking, you know, this is really, really great. This is really great for a number of reasons. One is that I'm getting known, you know, really quick in places I really didn't want to be known. However, I was watching my father. Now, my father and I had been fighting for a couple years, especially over the Vietnam War. Kent State happened just the year before, and so our emotions were a little tense. So as we went on, by the way, we did manage to get those blue jeans, and that changed the world right there. Let me see if I get. Well, toward the end of my junior year, I got a call from the United States Naval Academy, and they were offering me an opportunity to go there. However, I was not interested, and I basically told them to pack sand. All right? Well, who would know, but just a few years later, I would join the Navy. Duh. Okay. I joined the Navy. I ended up in submarines right across the river here. Did that for about 6 years. And when I got to a place, I think it was in 1983, we were just about to get underway, and I was starting to get really disturbed about how my dad was living in my head all the time. I had given him free rent, and I was angry all the time. I realized that he had I had imprisoned myself because of our relationship. There's a parable that talks about a rich man, a king, who had a servant that owed him $1 million. And what happened was that he was going to throw him into debtor's prison, but the man begged. He begged and begged, and finally the king said, "Okay, you are forgiven." Well, later that day, that same man, he went and he found somebody that owed him only a couple dollars and said, "Pay up." Well, the man could not pay up. Instead, he was thrown into prison. When the king heard about this, he grabbed hold of this guy who had been forgiven much and had not forgiven, and he had him thrown into debtor's prison. Well, I found out, discovered in my own life that that's what was happening with me and my dad. We had come to this place where I had imprisoned myself because I did not ever get to that place of forgiveness. He owned me. So I went up to visit him just before I was getting underway, and in one evening, we managed to work some things out. But it came because we decided that we were worth it. He had invited me to listen to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was speaking at his Rotary Club, and after that, I realized something about my dad. We were driving back home, and I reminded him that I was very I was missing my grandfather who just passed away. And he said to me, I don't miss him. Well, I was kind of shocked. Here's a man that I loved. I thought he was the greatest guy ever. And yet my father was telling me that he was not missing him at all. I was confused, and I asked him why. And then he began to tell me a story about how my grandfather wasn't what he seemed to be. That he had been an alcoholic, that he had beat my grandmother and everybody else in the house, had tore the place up. Sad story. I never saw him that way, fortunately. But my dad, that's the way he remembered it. Now, to search for common ground, we have to learn how to dialogue, which is not debate, which is not even discussion, which is only debate light. Dialogue requires that you get to know the person. You get to extend and open yourself to that person and let them do it with you. I got involved very quickly in politics, specifically in the abortion issue. I worked for a group called Search for Common Ground in Washington. And what we managed to do is find ways to dialogue with people, allow people from both sides to come together and begin to dialogue. Shortly after that, this was about 1992 time frame. I was showing up at pretty much all the hot spots, and I had an opinion. But what I was realizing was that unlike the situation that had happened between me and my dad, I was not being a peacemaker, which I thought I was all about. This is Gaston Hall in Georgetown Law School, and I spoke there. This is back in 1995 on April 11th. We almost had a little riot break out here, but fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. We learned how to dialogue, and this is something that I find true. It says this: in recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute. I've learned this is always a matter of proactive forgiveness and proactive love that we are going to succeed in a world that is full of conflict and debate. And so to end this, I want to say one thing. And that is something that I say pretty much every week, so I'm pretty good at it. It is this: whether you accept it or not, I am going to bless you. This is how it goes. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. May the Lord set his countenance upon you, and may the Lord give you peace. Thank you.